There we go. All right, so we are back, and Trevor remembered what he wanted to say. So this is news part 2, and then we'll do Spider-Man for you guys.
Two things, actually, as I'm sitting here. When I was talking about the Inhumans book, I totally forgot about Miss Marvel and Moon Girl. They're Inhumans, so technically those are Inhumans books too. Anyway, so I was looking over Star Wars, and I saw the editor's name, and it completely came back to me what I was going to say. It was Jordan D. White. I saw a conversation between him and Jerry Duggan online for clarification about the not canceling, but more like ending of Guardians of the Galaxy. It's going to end at issue 150 because, one, the sales were low. So Jerry Duggan went to Marvel and he pitched this big Infinity story, and they decided instead of carrying on in multiple books, what they're going to do is they're going to create a new title altogether, which is going to kick off with the Infinity Countdown one-shots. And that's going to be the Guardians of the Galaxy book. So it's the same exact book. It's the same story with all the same characters, the same creative team, artists, everything. But instead of Guardians of the Galaxy, it's going to be called Infinity whatever. So that's that. And Guardians of the Galaxy 151 was solicited, but the solicitation for that book has now been rebranded as Infinity Countdown Adam Warlock. And that's that. I saw a conversation on Twitter between, because everybody is like hassling Jerry Duggan, like, what the fuck's going on with Guardians of the Galaxy? Is it canceled?
Poor guy.
Poor guy. His whole Twitter feed is like, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? And he doesn't want, and like, he just doesn't want to say anything because I don't know if he knows if he can say anything. So he's like, go ask Jordan D. White. So I went over to Jordan D. White.
Once you start answering one question, it's just floodgates. You know what I'm saying?
It is. And then more questions keep coming. Well, then what's this going to be? What's that going to be?
Yeah.
So he put it on his editor, and he's like, go ask Jordan White. So, and then I scrolled down to that conversation at the bottom. Jordan White clarified everything and went in about how Duggan made the pitch, and it's not necessarily getting canceled. It's just changing into a new title altogether. And I'm like,
again,
that's pretty cool. Yeah, again, like seriously, it went from Guardians of the Galaxy to all new Guardians of the Galaxy, back to Guardians of the Galaxy to Infinity something. Like, it's going to kick off with
Fiasco,
yeah, Adam Warlock. So, but I mean, I'm excited because Jerry Duggan was building this awesome giant story, and it does make sense to not call it Guardians of the Galaxy because we had our set Guardians team, and then Ant-Man joined, and then Nova showed up, and then they joined the Nova Corps, and then Adam Warlock showing up, and all these characters just keep fucking like all the cosmic characters just keep showing up and becoming like main players in the story, that it's less and less becoming about the Guardians of the Galaxy and becoming more about just the cosmic community of Marvel. So it does make sense to completely change the title name and just make it this big story that focuses on all these characters. So, I'm cool with that. Well, let's see how it goes. So it'll end with 18 issues. I mean, that's a decent run, and it was well written. So
I don't care what a book sells if I enjoy it. Like, I'm a fan of Gwenpool, and that sells like shit. So I don't. I got really scared this week because at the end of the issue it says to be continued or the end. And I was like, I think that's like a hint, like it's coming to, it probably has till March, I would say, possibly.
And then it's going to go.
Yeah. But I also don't mind that. Like, if you give me a 25 issue run, I don't hate that. Like, I don't need something to go on for, not everything Spider-Man that has a life of 700 issues. You know what I'm saying? And goes on forever. So
sometimes books like that get saved by trade. Like Miss Marvel, she only sells like 8,000 to 14,000 copies a month, but she's like 60 something issues into her run because like all the people on the internet who always cry about diversity and stuff but never buy single issues, they buy the trade paperbacks. So they don't contribute anything to the title. But that's dangerous. Like, I always see people online and they're like, oh, I'll wait for the trade, and you feel like just saying to them, like, yeah, wait for the trade. Then you liked the book and they canceled it because you didn't buy the single issue.
Yeah, you shouldn't really do it with brand new series or new characters that you like. You know what I'm saying? Like, for example, like the new DC characters coming out, you can't like trade weight those guys. You know what I'm saying? If you like those books, you got to support them.
You got to support them. You got to buy those single issues, or else they're going to get canceled, because sometimes they get nervous and the trade paperbacks don't come out. And like sometimes the trade paperback will come out as soon as the 6-issue series ends, like the storyline ends. But sometimes they don't come out for months, and then the publishing company gets scared, and then they pull that trigger.
Or they come out in a hardcover first, and you don't want to spend $30 on 6 issues. And
yep, exactly.
And you wait for the trade paperback, and that kills it too. But
so you got to buy those single issues, folks.
Yeah, so that's, I hope Spirit of Vengeance gets picked up. I haven't really paid attention to sales in a while. Like, I've been all involved in this house shit. I haven't paid attention to the little tiny things I used to pay attention to with free time. So I hope this one sells pretty good, because I've liked it, and
me too.
We'll get to that one. We're going to talk Spider-Man Venom Alpha Inc. or Venom Inc. Alpha.
Venom Inc.
So that's where we're at here, and we're going to discuss this. And it's basically, another Venom crossover that's going to go between Amazing Spider-Man and Venom for 2 issues each. And then in typical Spider-Man event type crossover style lately, it's going to begin and end with an Alpha and an Omega. They did that for Clone Conspiracy. They did something just like that for Spider-Verse too. But yeah, we're gonna kick this issue off here. It's Amazing Spider-Man Venom Inc. Alpha #1, written by Dan Slott and Mike Costa. That's what the credits say. Anyway, this is an all Mike Costa issue, if you ask me.
Yeah, me too.
They definitely plotted the series together, because I'm sure the Spider-Man issues will be all Slott, but this Venom Inc. issue was 100% Mike Costa. You can just tell from the writing, and that doesn't make it bad. I enjoy his Venom.
I thought it was me too.
Yeah. Ryan Stegman and Brian Reber for art team, and then we got Marvel Comics production. So here we go. We're going to get into the blurb, tell you guys what's going down here. I know exactly what everyone wants from Marvel for Christmas, and it's another Venom-centric mini event, isn't it? Nailed it. I know it. So strap in here, because here we go in true 90s and then again mid-2000s fashion. We have a good old Venom showdown on our hands. So let's jump into this extra size Alpha issue and see what we have in store for the next 5. Well, we start things off in Philadelphia, PA. And it makes note of, mentioning last week. So this is kind of a flashback. And we check in on Mania. And then Mania isn't a well-known part of the symbiote lore, but they do a decent job enough of giving you the lowdown of what she's capable of, and what's going on with her and where she's at. So again, Philadelphia, she's just flying through the skies in Spider-Man style, stopping crimes, and she's a little chatty, kind of like more smart-ass version of a Spider-Man, you can say, with a little more edge, obviously, because she's covered in symbiote. But she's chatting with Flash.
Punk rock.
Yeah,
punk rock Spider-Man.
Yeah, and this Mania. If you Google Mania Wiki, and we're gonna cover her in the midpoint facts, but read that wiki, because it's probably worth more. It's a better wiki to read than, I'm sure, stories to follow. You know what I'm saying? Through the line.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Reading the single issues. But her wiki is bonkers, and how the symbiote came to be and everything. And we'll cover that in the midpoint facts. So there's a tease for you guys about what's coming up. But so the story starts off, she's swinging through, stopping crimes. Really kind of bored mentioning that to Flash while they're chatting. And Flash mentions back to her that he's still looking for Venom. He's been on the hunt for Venom and really hasn't caught up with them. And obviously, if you've been following the book, Venom is back with Eddie. At one of Mania's stops, she ends up running into some problems, kind of running in just blind and too cocky for her own good, and ends up being taken down by some quote-unquote thieves. And I didn't realize till probably the second read-through of this book, but it appears to be former Venom wearer Lee Price and just a squad of goons, right?
Why didn't that dawn on me? That didn't dawn on me
either.
I know.
Dude, it took me like literally the third time I read through it. and then reading like someone else's a couple reviews, because it doesn't look like how he's been drawn before. And this is pretty much that's the main reason it threw me off. I just thought it was just a band of thugs. And when I first wrote the review too, before I edited it, that's what I had in there, like just random group of thieves. But yeah, it's Lee Price and also a random group of thieves.
It makes sense following the end of the last Venom issue where he gets out of jail and you just know he's going on the hunt for symbiotes. So
yeah, up to no good, right? And we covered that one last episode. Yeah, so there's a connection for everybody. In case you were clueless like me and Trevitt were about what was going on there, unless you you don't always reread every comic multiple times. But I wrote the review, I did it by myself, and now I'm doing it again with you, so I picked up on it. But she ends up getting her ass whipped. They pull out Venom type weapons on it, a flamethrower and a sonic blaster, which basically strips poor I think her name's Andrea, of the Venom symbiote. And then we flash over back to good old New York, and we're at the Guggenheim Museum, and we have just a couple schmo bad guys, the Ringer and the Tumbler, attempting to just do their corny old thing of stealing whatever they can get their grubby little hands on. When they get interrupted by Spider-Man. And he does some old school shit, signs the Spider-Man signal on him, the spider signal, which he hasn't busted out in a long time that I've noticed. But anyway, he dispatches of these no-namers kind of pretty quickly, but gets snuck up on by Black Cat, who kind of tricks him into falling under this heavy sculpture, and he gets stuck while she kind of prances off saying she's going to steal some shit. But yeah, like Spider-Man's written pretty jokey in this issue and I enjoy it until the very end, and I have a little beef with it at the end. But
I love when he's like when they're talking about the 5 families, he's like, "You guys have been to jail 400 times, and you've already got 5 families." He's like, "I'm going to talk about the warden about your conjugal visits."
It cost us these are a little more dirtier type jokes than Dan Slott would write. See, that was like my first clue of like, wait a minute, this is definitely my cost right in this issue. But anyway, later Peter ends up after this fight and him getting out of the statue, he ends up meeting up with Flash. Flash calls him to come to a diner, and they meet up, and he wants Peter. He knows he's tight with Spidey. He doesn't know he's Spidey anymore in this continuity or continuity. And he relays a message to Spider-Man for him. Or he wants him to. And Flash informs him he wants to make sure Venom's okay because of the Mania attack. And Flash also has some inkling of wanting to get Venom back. And, Peter mentions to Flash, Spider-Man's not a huge fan of Venom. And if, Spider-Man had his way with him, he'd dispose of it altogether. And Flash is like, well, no hard feelings, thanks for coming to meet me, and we'll catch up later. So they part ways, but not before Peter slides a spider tracer on his shoulder. And they go off. Speaking of Venom, who's basically the title person of this goddamn story, he shows up about midway through, and he is brutally whooping the shit out of this dude named the Looter. He's about to straight up kill him when Eddie basically yeah, at first I did too. Before he's just like, oh, now I'm gonna kill him. I'm like, oh, you didn't already? Jesus Christ.
No, that blood, he smashes him, that blood's going. I'm like, oh my god, he's dead. I was like, he is not alive after that.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I thought he was already dead. And Eddie ends up holding him back, but the dude does suffer some pretty gruesome injuries. And Eddie ends up taking him and Venom back to Alchemax, searching for a more permanent solution to this temporary drug they've been taking. And it seems to be working less and less the more Venom's subjected to it. It seems to be becoming more of an issue. Anyway, once Eddie's inside the building, we see Flash, who's hot on his trail, having tracked him down. And there's some kind of like bullshit that that Flash has been mentioning about how he can sense where Venom is, but I don't know why he's waited this long to try to track him down. If that was the case,
I mean, maybe in the history of it, it hasn't, because after Space Knight, I mean, how long has he not had it? Because Lee didn't have it that long, and technically Eddie hasn't had it that long either.
No, I know they've each had it like basically 6 issues each. Lee had it 6, Venom's had it about 6 to 8. So whatever time frame that is in the Marvel universe, but anyway, Flash had it for a couple years prior to them, So I buy it, but it's just like weird he waits till now to do it. But for story purposes, it's not a big deal. It's just I've been reading Venom forever. It was a nitpick to me. But Spider-Man also shows up on the scene because of the tracer he's planted on Flash. So Flash ends up getting kicked out of trying to get into Alchemax while Eddie ends up getting in. But while Flash is getting kicked out, he grabs, the old move, grab the security guard's key card while he's not looking, sneaks his way back into the building, and so does Spider-Man. So we got, a big old showdown about to happen here. Everyone's converging to one spot. And we check in on the lab where Eddie is, meeting with this doctor he's been working with that's come up with these injections to keep Venom in check. And this doctor mentions how he's been working on something that's a more permanent solution, but it hasn't been tested yet because Eddie won't leave them a sample of the symbiote to test it on. That's when Flash bursts into the lab, and he basically confronts Eddie, and he's like, "Yo, give me my shit back, yo." Eddie's talking shit back. He's like, "Not happening. Venom is mine. Always been mine." But Venom has other ideas. So Venom, in some crazy splash page action, starts separating in like 2 different parts, half of it wrapped around Flash, half of it wrapped around Eddie. And that's when Spider-Man bursts in on the scene, kind of acting like an asshole and flipping out a little bit, and kind of gets the hint in the whiff from the doctor that's the giant vat of white-looking semen stuff might help everybody out. So just immediately thunders over there and tips the whole vat over.
I liked that part where like the symbiote has such a close relationship and a deep love for both characters that it can't decide who it wants to go to. Yeah. So it's like split.
Oh, I really like that part. Yeah, I really like the how it's torn between them, and it looked awesome. Like any splash page or giant single page or double page, fully focused splash is awesome looking in this book. It really is.
Yeah.
And that symbiote one is really, it takes the cake, but because it's crazy. But Spider-Man acts like a little bit of an asshole, causing all this stuff to spill. Doesn't he? That's my biggest problem with this issue. Yeah, he just acts like a prick. And spills this shit, gets all over Flash, who, as our first cliffhanger, is revealed to now be from the goo and the Venom struggle to be anti-Venom. And I don't really know what's going on with Eddie. He seems to just be on his knees. I'm not sure if he has any Venom left for him or it's just all gone to Flash, but he does have like some goo left on him. So I don't know if he's still healing or what's up. So we'll see, I guess, next issue. But then we splash to our second cliffhanger, and it is Lee Price walking into one of those, villain bars, I guess I would call it. And he confronts the Looter, who is the one out of the 3 no-name villains that got his ass kicked by Venom, right? They got him all mixed up now because it's like the Looter, the Flipper, the fucking...
It was the guy we thought was dead when he got smashed and all the blood cleaned up.
So it's the Looter. And he's getting tapped on the shoulder by Lee Price, who's like, "Yep, you're going to help us out with something." And Looter's like, "Nah, I work alone. I'm the Looter." And he ends up getting, when he looks up to see who it is, ends up getting spit on with like this, obviously black symbiote goo. And the end reveal is like the whole bar has symbiote goo on their face. So that happened quickly.
Yeah.
And it looks like we got Lee Price which now makes a little more sense that it's Lee Price, right? Running like a symbiote army, it looks like.
He's got the boots
Ready
on and the
to
pants.
do war. Yeah.
He looks like, and he's a military guy, so it's, and the hair's black, like, it's definitely Lee Price. It has to be. So there's no way it's not.
Yeah. So that ends the issue as far as buy, borrow, or forget goes. I think I said borrow on Marvel Minute, but talking about it again, I would edge towards buy, especially if you're a Spider-Man fan. It's definitely enjoyable. I was really upset when I first reviewed it by myself, especially that Spider-Man acted like an asshole at the end of this issue, but it does lead to some cool things. So I'll forgive it for now. I like Anti-Venom being back. And we'll see where it goes. But I also really enjoyed the art, and I was a little hard on it for Marvel Minute and not giving the art enough credit when I went through it one more time for the written review, because the art was awesome. But yeah, it's a fun book, although it has its issues. So there's flaws to it, but it's enjoyable. And I hate to always feel like I'm just like, yeah, every Venom event is awesome. That's also kind of my trepidation. But this is fun, and I would recommend it. That I'm going to lean towards buy, I guess.
All right.
What about you?
I'm going to start off with the art. I love Ryan Stegman. I've been missing him on Renew Your Vows so much that this was just what I needed. Like, I have like Ryan Stegman withdrawals, like that scene when Spidey's like on his way in and he pulls that door open. Like, that's one of the best looking Spider-Man, like when he pulls the door open and it says Scrunch, and the dude in the wheelchair is like, Spider-Man. Like, that's one of the best looking Spider-Man frames I've seen. I mean, I love Stuart Immonen. He does a great job, but it just looks so crisp and so beautiful. Like, I loved it.
Yeah.
And I really liked it. You can definitely tell that Mike Costa wrote this issue because he nails like what he's been doing with the symbiote and how it is, and the relationship between Eddie and the symbiote, and now Flash and the symbiote. That was my favorite part of this book, was the Venom stuff, because I just love seeing that. I love the way he handles the symbiote. I love the fact that he's built up this deep bond that we know that Eddie and Venom have, and he's pretty much made the symbiote its own character. Like, it's not just a guy in a suit who is Venom. It's the suit and the guy. You know what I mean? Like, you think you're getting narration, but it's really the suit talking in the host's mind. I love all of that, and I love that.
Yeah.
Like, in the beginning of the Venom series by Mike Costa, it was like super upset that it wasn't with Flash anymore. And it was very happy that because of Flash, it was good, and it was a hero, and it was very pleased with itself. And then it met up with Lee, and Lee was doing all these terrible things, and it started to like warp it a little bit. And then Eddie gets it back, and it's kind of like back to old times. And then when they're in this laboratory, it sees Flash, and it's split, because it loves Eddie and it loves the relationship that they did have, but Flash is very special to the symbiote, so it was very hard for it to like stay with Eddie, and that's why we got split. And this is where my big problem came in: Spider-Man just being a douchebag. Like,
yeah, he was fine throughout the entire issue until he goes full douche at the end. Yeah,
he was, and he was kind of a douche to Flash, like when he was talking about killing it, and Flash was like, "Wow, like, is there something wrong with Spider-Man?"
Yeah, I'm with you there.
He's like, is there something wrong with Spider-Man just like willing to kill a living thing so easily? Because like, he thinks the symbiote is evil, and he should know more than anyone that it's not really the symbiote, it's the person that influences the symbiote. Like, he couldn't handle it, that's fine, but Flash could handle it. You know what I mean? He turned the symbiote into a hero. Obviously, Eddie tries his hardest, but he's just not willful enough because he has his own problems. And then
he's got it. I think like Eddie's temper issues just go to like, it's kind of like just makes the symbiote animalistic. You know what I'm saying? And Flash is more kind-hearted.
And then Spider-Man runs in, and the doctor's trying to tell him about the anti-venom fluid, and he's like, "Oh yeah, got it." And he just fucking like, did you not learn ever anything like about your rash decisions that you've made and tanked your company? And then here you come in making another rash decision, like a dickhead. And I love the result. The result was badass. Like, we got Flash as anti-venom and that badass armor suit again. But like, Spider-Man was just like a really big dickhead towards the end of the issue. That kind of bothered me. But all in all, I really did enjoy it. I'm gonna give it a buy because it made me laugh. I mean, this is probably like I really laughed my ass off the three first legacy issues of Amazing Spider-Man. Like I think that's the funniest I've seen Slott make Peter in a little while. But Mike Costa just told some really good jokes in this issue, and I laughed out loud to the point where my neighbor probably heard me downstairs. So I really did enjoy it. And Ryan Stegman, I just love Ryan Stegman. I can't get enough of him. He's going to be doing the Amazing Spider-Man issues, and I can't wait to see more. It's definitely a buy.
Yeah, well, I just switched things up on last minute here. We're going to do Astonishing X-Men next because it leads into the midpoint facts, who have people from these first two books we're going to feature. So Trevitt's going to take over and explain Astonishing X-Men along with the ending to Astonishing X-Men 6 that I was utterly confused by, and he explained to me when we weren't recording. So he's going to help everyone out here. If you were in my boat and a little lost. But yeah, we're letting Trevitt take it from here. We got Astonishing X-Men number 6, halfway point of this series.
All right. So, Astonishing X-Men number 6, written by Charles Soule with art and cover and inks and colors by Mike Del Mundo, with a little bit of color help from Marco D'Alfonso, and letters by the great Clayton Cowles from Virtual Calligraphy. So the solicit is Life of X conclusion. We are trapped in the Shadow King's web. All strands have led here. We have seen sacrifice, battle, manipulation, lies, and the darkest truths. Now, at last, Charles Xavier and his X-Men will save one world and lose another. That's actually a pretty good solicitation. One of the better ones I've seen.
It's not bad. Yeah. Probably one that hasn't been changed 11 times before the book finally comes out, you know?
Yeah. They do. They change them so many times, and they just end up being a mess by the time we come to them, the final product. So this issue is everywhere. It like jumps back and forth. Like certain parts of it, I wrote it as it is, explaining the page, but then certain parts of it could be like too confusing, so I just described it. Just
together, kind of.
Yeah.
Skip around a little bit.
So we pick up this issue where we left off from the last, with an army of the Shadow King's infected Londoners or whatever, yelling, "Set me free!" But only it's a bit worse from the last issue. There's a shit ton more of them.
Yeah, it's like
Angel. Yeah, it's spreading real bad. And Angel it was making his transition into Archangel, but now he's full on Archangel, which is scary and dangerous because he's a a fucking killer, like psycho. Dead killer. Yeah, he's a psycho killer. You point, he destroys. That's when he's Archangel. If you've ever read Uncanny X-Force, you can see how scary he can be. So they, he changes into Archangel to try to turn the tide. And then we get some narration from Xavier about how this was what he needed and wanted in the first place. And that will make much sense later, the opening from Xavier. And it was funny because Xavier and Farouk, the Shadow King, both talk in black.
I know.
In their bubbles. So
I know it took me a couple pages. Confusing, yeah.
Yeah. So like
and I was really waiting for the reveal where like Shadow King had just completely taken over Xavier because they were talking the same, you know what I'm saying? But I guess it's their word bubbles on the plane.
Yeah, the astral plane. Because in previous issues, I think, I can't remember at the moment, but I'm pretty sure that Farouk might have done some narration, but whatever. I mean, you figure it out by the next page because, well, towards the end, the second read, I picked it. I figured it out. I was like, oh, okay. I mean, I figured it out towards the middle of the first read, but it just made, when I read it the second time, I was like, why didn't this make sense to me the first time? Anyway. So then we head over to the astral plane where Farouk and the Shadow King is claiming early victory while also admitting that he cheated a bit. But he's in a nice mood, so he's letting Charles dispose of the remaining X-Men, Phantom X, Mystique, and Rogue, as if he had won the bet according to the rules that were set up in the first place. The rules were if he won, he could, gently dispose of the X-Men. They were going to die either way. There was,
right.
whether Shadow King won
It
or
was
not.
like
So,
Jim likes to say, a monkey paw. They were dead either way. He still had to
yeah,
play the game.
he still had to play the game. It's just how they died. So the remaining X-Men show up in their snazzy armors and they attack the Shadow King. And that's basically it for the moment. We get the credits page, and then we're back on the streets of London where Archangel is fighting a possessed Logan and Gambit. And that's it. It's pretty much 2 pages of a cool fight with some banter. There's some really cool part where Gambit picks up 3 of Archangel's neurotoxin blades, charges them, and chucks them back at him.
Yeah.
Yeah. At first, I was like, "What is he picking up?" I was like, "Are those like Superman's
The art
krypton
doesn't help
crystals?"
you out,
Like,
really. You really
no,
gotta like make your own,
it's
jump to the
mushy.
conclusions here. Yeah.
Because when he's holding them, all 3 of those the blades in one hand, they kind of look like playing cards. But then when he throws
Yep.
them, you don't know what the fuck they are. They're just like these
I know.
blobs. They look like they could be rocks when he throws
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. The angle they're shaped helps a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Like it
Yes.
looks like a 3D diamond is almost coming at you, but the no
Mm-hmm.
lines in it help none. You know what I'm saying?
No, no. Especially when they're coming straight on, like straight
Yeah.
at like the camera, if it were like on a
Yeah.
TV show. It just look like rocks. So so then we check in with the Ministry of Defense, where they're happy about the fight because it's distracting away from their clean room protocol, which is going to decimate this, pretty much that part of
Kind of,
London and the surrounding
yeah,
area.
they're gonna like nuke it basically, aren't they?
Yeah. Yep. They're basically, well, I was thinking more like a Moab, like a non-nuclear, like super powerful strike that will just like cleanse the area. Like it'll destroy everything in its path, but it won't damage it with nuclear radiation, so they can't rebuild
Right.
on it.
Right, right.
Because they're fucking freaked out by the psychic infection, and it's you know doesn't
Yeah,
get
it's like
any
venom.
more
They
out of
don't want it
control.
spread anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't want it to spread. They don't want it to get any more out of control than it already is. And then they decide to transfer the EVAC codes to all their assets on the scene, which was a good lead-in to where we go next. We catch up with Psylocke on the roof with those assets, and they're all kinetically bound. And she's checking in with Archangel, and then they get the EVAC code, the guys, the assets. And one of the guys tries to tell Psylocke that if she lets them go, all will be well. They'll be forgiven. But she's not dumb, She's fucking psychic, for Christ's sake. Like who do they think she's kidding? Like she could just read their minds.
Yeah.
So this dude's super eager to bounce because he knows what's coming. And then she asks him, "What's the clean room protocol?" And he's not, he doesn't know. He claiming he doesn't know. So she reads his mind. Then we flash back to the astral plane and the fight, more fighting. And Professor Xavier assesses
Yeah.
why everyone in the astral plane fighting were perfect for their job and why everyone who is fighting outside in London are not. So, and how he pretty much lucked out. Like
Yeah.
Rogue, Phantom X, and Mystique were the perfect adaptable fighters to be inside the Phantom Zone fighting Farouk, helping him out because they're malleable. And Logan, Gambit, and all the other people on the outside are so set in their ways and the type of people that they are, it wouldn't have been useful to Charles, to fight Farouk with those people. So the fight's kind of crazy, but they're exactly what Charles needed because it's too distracting for the Shadow King and his mind is fractured. Trying to fight the X-Men in the astral plane, trying to fight them in London while trying to keep Charles all tied up and control all the people on the streets. This is it. This is the moment that Charles has been waiting for. Farouk is barely paying attention to him. And, why not? He hasn't put any stress on these chains or tried to break free for centuries because in the astral plane, time goes differently. So Charles has been there with him for like hundreds of years. So, what was the point? There was no way for him to free himself anyhow, so he wasn't going to try. And it also makes the Shadow King feel like he has a sense of security, like, oh, Charles knows he's not going to be able to get out of these chains, so I can commit some of my energies to these jobs and not focus on him so much. But that was a mistake because it's created the perfect storm. With some planning and a pinch of luck, Charles is finally presented with the opportunity and means to set himself free, and he does. He fucking breaks free of his chains, blasts the Shadow King, puts on some kind of cool white knight armor, and ends Farouk shoves a sword
Yeah.
right through his spider body, which is kind of disgusting and freaky when Mike Del Mundo draws it. That was one of the only
Yeah.
things I really liked about the art, was how creepy he looked in that like Black Widow body.
Yeah, it looks pretty final.
It does. Yeah, it does look pretty final. He's gone. He's dead, or he's weakened to the point where you're not going to see him for a long time. If we know anything about the Shadow King, this won't be the last we see of him, but it'll probably be the last we see of him for a couple of years. So, so this is when things get kind of crazy. So in London, Gambit and Logan are like, everything gets jumbled together. So London, Gambit, and Logan go free, but not before Archangel, can stop his attack, and he smashes them. The Ministry of Defense is ready to drop their bomb. Betsy redirects Archangel to stop the bomb while she tries to wipe the infection free from all the people. All the while, all this is going on. Like, it's all going on like the same page, but in between frames and panels, Phantom X is having a panel here, a panel there, where he's making peace with himself, getting ready for some kind of grand sacrifice. And you can tell by the way he's talking that, he's making peace with his life and who he is, because you get the feeling he's not coming back from the astral plane. So Betsy is freaking out because even though the Shadow King is gone and he's stopped, all this crazy shit he set in motion is still going down. So a voice calls out to her telling her everything is going to be okay now. And it's Phantom X, but she's confused because she didn't pull him out of the astral plane yet. And then he pulls off his mask and tells her who he is and why we saw Phantom X making his peace, because it's Charles. He took over, he implanted his consciousness inside Phantom X's body. So now Charles Xavier and Phantom X are pretty much one and the same. Now, I'm not exactly sure what this means for Phantom X. Is he gone forever? Is his consciousness in the astral plane and it can be retrieved and put back into his body when Charles finds a more suitable host? Who knows? I mean, I'm sure they'll suss that out later on in another X-Men book, or maybe later on in this series. But and he tells her, like, he's like, I'm Charles Xavier, but you can call me X, which is weird because I think the next storyline is called a man called X. So I guess we'll have to wait and see for the next storyline what's going to happen with Charles Xavier in this Phantom X body. But I really like this issue. I think Charles Soule has been writing the best X-Men book that was probably been written in a few years. You know what I mean? It's a really good story.
It is like the one I care to see the story stick through on the most. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, he has this plan set out, and he's making his way towards it. It's a giant 12-issue story with I think 2 acts. I mean, most of that is supposed to have 3 acts, but this is the end of Act 1, unless Act 2 is just going to be like 2 issues, and then Act 3 is going to, be the last 4 issues. But this is the end of Act 1, and I think this is like the prelude, the setup for the big shit that's going to go down within the next 6 issues, because we're at the halfway mark here, and supposedly towards the end of this series, something really, really big is going to happen, which I think it's going to be about summer, because it started in June, I think. So in next June, something big is going to come. Is supposed to come out of this book, and we are halfway through. We already got Charles Xavier back in the universe. So I don't know if that's going to play out in other X-Men books, because this is in continuity. And it did happen, but I just don't know where in time this is all happening, because they all take place at different moments in time of the universe and blah blah blah. Like some books, like All New Wolverine, they're still telling stories before Secret Empire happened, so you don't know where you are. So I figured that out last issue of All New Wolverine. I figured that out, that like this story's being told before Secret Empire, because there's no way it's not. I forget the detail that made me think, because of the fucking the Alpha Flight, their base up in space, the Triskelion. It's gone, but for some reason it was in that story, which means it's taken place before that. So I don't know when this is taking place in time, but I really love the story. Charles Soule is doing a genius job, but the art in this issue was just kind of a drag for me. I'm not a big fan of Mike Del Mundo. I love when he does fantasy stuff like Weird World, but when it comes to a book like, we were talking about it before we started recording, books like Avengers or X-Men, like I rather see what we've got in the previous 5 issues from Jim Chung or Ed McGuinness or Ramon Lasanas, like a nice clean style. Carlos Pacheco, like all those styles. They just fit the book better. I mean, Mike Del Mundo, it would have been cool, like maybe if when they were in the astral plane, he handled that because it fits it, because it's kind of a dream world.
Yeah.
But it just didn't, like, sometimes there were things happening in this book and I couldn't see it, or I didn't know who was where or what was what. It was kind of mushy. Like, you really have to stop and examine to see everything that's going on. I'm not saying he's a bad artist, because Weird World, his art was fucking gorgeous, like absolutely gorgeous, but it just doesn't, I'm just not interested in it in this story. The writing was fantastic, but the art was okay. But it's still going to be a buy for me, because the overall story that's being told here is the best X-Men story that's being told throughout Marvel Comics or the X-Men universe or what have you. So it's definitely worth the price of admission just for that alone. So
Yeah,
and Xavier's
yeah,
back.
I mean, I don't have much different to say than everything that you've said. Like, I really enjoyed the story that they're telling. I'm interested to see, after now Professor Xavier's back, what the hell is going to happen for the next 6 issues. I really thought that this would be played out a lot longer somehow, and I'm glad it's not, though. At the same time, because I was kind of tired of being on the astral plane and.
Yes.
Yeah, but I have all the same problems with the art. Like, I was utterly confused, especially towards the end, and the way it was paced a little bit as far as what was going on. I had a hard time telling at the conclusion, but I still think it's a buy, like the series overall. And yeah, you don't want to miss the end to the first arc, basically. So yeah, I'm gonna edge it towards a buy for those reasons. But yeah, I really wish they had a different artist. It made it the story a lot harder to figure out. You know, even the fights were they were like, it's still
Messy.
art I can't do, and looks good, but it's not art I want to rely on to tell me a story. So
no,
it's like art you want to put on your wall for a painting. You know what I'm saying? That it's more like that kind of art.
Most definitely.
But not like art I want to read in a story over 25 pages, because it makes you feel like you're reading the book forever, trying to figure out what's going on while you're reading.
And the next two, I think the next two, oh, itchy, sorry. The next one is going to be Phil Noto, the guy who is doing Inhumans Once and Future King. So that should be really good. And then after that is Paulo Sequeira, the guy who did, I mean, he's done a bunch of things, but what has he done recently? He just worked on a DC book. For some reason, it's escaping me which one, but he did the Free Comic Book Day issue of Spectacular Spider-Man, and that art was fantastic. So I think
I like that a lot too.
Yeah, so that's going to work well. Both those next.
It'll be weird to see this issue thrown in the middle of a trade collection when you know they're going to throw all 12 issues together in one collection down the line somewhere, and this in the middle is just going to be like,
that'd be awesome.
What the hell's going on?
Yeah, it's going to be weird to go through all those beautiful, clean styles, and then you get to this, and you're like, what? What happened here?
I'm with you. But we're going to wrap up book section 1. Going to go off to the midpoint facts and our last book of the night.